In 2007, in Porosenkov Log near Ekaterinburg, enthusiasts discovered 150 grams of bones which, as it was later established, were human. The find was located 70 meters from the grave, where, in 1979 and then again in 1991, the first Ekaterinburg remains were discovered. Among the 150 grams of bones were also several teeth, well preserved, with a white and slightly yellowish color. Investigator Vladimir Solovyov, and later the current investigation as well, claim that these 150 grams of bones are the remains of Tsarevich Alexei and Grand Duchess Maria. Naturally, no anthropological forensic examination can identify these remains to establish the identity due to their small quantity. Individual genetic analysis is also impossible, if only because there is no preserved biological material belonging to Tsarevich Alexei or Grand Duchess Maria. And attributing the remains to the Romanov family, which numbers in the thousands, also cannot lead to identification of the individual. Anthropologists have established, with a certain degree of probability, that these remains belong to two different people. Some, presumably, belong to a young woman around 20 to 30 years old, while others, according to investigative expert Denis Pizhemsky, belong to a teenager, a youth aged 9 to 11 years. The bones were found at a shallow depth, about 40 centimeters, together with charcoal from a campfire. Modern investigators believe that these are the remains of the burned bodies of Tsarevich Alexei and Grand Duchess Maria, who were mentioned in the so-called Yurovsky note. In Yurovsky's memoirs and in the transcript of the Old Bolsheviks meeting of 1934, where Yurovsky spoke, the direct organizer of the murder of the royal martyrs. The original Yurovsky note was compiled by the well-known Bolshevik historian Pokrovsky. According to this note, the bodies of Tsarevich Alexei and the lady-in-waiting Anna Demidova were allegedly burned by the Bolsheviks at Porosenkov Log on the night of July 19, 1918, then supposedly buried together with the ashes, and a new bonfire was lit on top. In 2008, a group of investigative experts, led by Sergei Nikitin, established that these 150 grams of remains had not been exposed to either fire or acid. The modern investigation similarly assigned the examination to a group of forensic experts led by Viktor Zvyagin, who concluded that one part of these remains had indeed been exposed to fire, another part to mild exposure, and some parts had not been exposed at all. Zviagin's group, based on the method of infrared spectrometry, asserts that the teeth from the second set of Ekaterinburg remains were subjected to heating at 300 to 500 degrees Celsius for 2 hours. In other words, they were either at the edge of the supposed bonfire or close to it. The well-known dentist Emil Agajanian and forensic medical expert Yuri Grigoriev conducted a joint forensic experiment to determine which expert was correct, Sergei Nikitin or Viktor Zvyagin. Is it possible that the teeth were really exposed to prolonged temperatures of 300 to 500 degrees and still remain so well preserved? Dentist Emil Agajanian provided 24 teeth recently extracted from his patients for the forensic experiment. The teeth were placed in muffle furnaces and heated for varying periods of time at temperatures of 230, 300, 350, and 400 degrees Celsius.
So, let's take them out after 15 minutes at a temperature of 236 degrees. Well, about 230 to 240, we can't lower it any further. Let's see. Well, what do we observe? Basically, the tooth has started to darken. The tooth has started to darken. It started darkening from the root upwards. Here you can see how much it darkened after 15 minutes. 230 degrees. Plus or minus 2 degrees, 40 minutes. We take it out and take a look. Here the area has noticeably darkened, and the tooth enamel has actually started to gradually break down and even crack. 350 degrees, we kept it in the muffled furnace for 2 hours, now we're taking it out. This is the condition. They've burned through, and you can even really feel it on both sides. 400 degrees, 1 hour in the muffled furnace. Taking it out. They've completely burned through. Not only that, they're also falling apart. Basically, they've disintegrated. Alright, we set the temperature first to 400 degrees and then increase it to 410 degrees, maintaining this level of heat for a total of 2 hours. As you can see, after this process, the tooth is now completely processed. Burned through, destroyed. There's nothing left, nothing white at all. 400 degrees, 2 hours, and it turns absolutely, completely into charcoal.
As a result of these experiments, the following was established. First, when heated for 15 minutes to 230 degrees, the roots of the teeth darken slightly. The teeth themselves remain fairly light. Second, when heated to 350 degrees for 2 hours, not only do the roots of the teeth darken, but the crown of the tooth also irreversibly darkens and turns black. Third, heating human teeth for approximately an hour to 400 degrees Fahrenheit essentially turns them into charcoal. Under the supervision of forensic medical expert Yuri Grigoriev, temperature measurements were taken at the edges of a bonfire where 3 domestic pig carcasses were burned. It was found that the air and objects located about 30 centimeters from the edge of the flame heat up to 350 degrees. So, it can be clearly and confidently stated that the teeth which were found in the second Ekaterinburg remains were definitely not exposed to fire. Moreover, they were not even located near the fire, despite being discovered together with pieces of charcoal from the bonfire. Thus, the conclusions of expert Zviagin's group turned out to be incorrect, while the conclusions of expert Nikitin were confirmed. Forensic dental expert Agadzhanyan, like the other investigators' experts, determined that among the second Ekaterinburg remains, there are no bones from the upper or lower human jaw. When asked how the discovered teeth ended up outside the jaw, the expert confidently replied that it would be impossible for a non-specialist to remove these teeth, the 6th and 8th molars, from the jaw of a living or recently deceased person. Only a highly qualified dental specialist could do this, and only with the help of special instruments. However, as archaeologists well know from ancient burials, over time, as the jaw decays, the teeth fall out on their own. It is obvious that this is exactly what happened in this case. Thus, based on the conclusion of the investigative expert Sergei Nikitin and the forensic experiments conducted by dentist Emil Agadzhanyan and forensic medical examiner Yuri Grigoriev, it can be concluded that the teeth from the second set of Ekaterinburg remains, like the other bones from these remains, were not exposed to fire or acid and evidently fell out of the jaw of the deceased as a result of its partial decomposition. Since the jaws along with the teeth were not found, it can be assumed that this burial, consisting of 150 grams of bone fragments, was artificially assembled, and these bones, like the teeth, were taken from some other place. In fact, this particular burial is actually a complete fabrication, and it is not the natural grave that is described in the Pokrovsky-Yurovsky note. 9 and 10. Field experiments. In order to determine to what temperature bones are heated when pieces of carcass are burned in a bonfire, on December 27, 2021, in the village of Barinino of the Ruskaya district, The 9th and 10th field experiments were conducted in the Moscow region. During the 9th experiment, 2 whole carcasses of domestic wild boars, each weighing about 80 kilograms, were cut into pieces of 6 to 8 kilograms and burned using a small amount of firewood, 120 kilograms, and a large amount of kerosene, 120 liters. At the same time, the 10th experiment was being conducted. On a neighboring bonfire, 2 whole wild boar carcasses, also weighing about 80 kilograms each, were burned using the same amount of firewood and kerosene. The purpose of this experiment was to determine the possibility of completely burning whole wild boar carcasses, as well as the time and amount of fuel required for this. During the 9th experiment, 2 hours after the bonfire was lit, a piece of the carcass was removed, the flesh was cut off, and the temperature of the bone was measured. It turned out to be above 180 degrees Celsius.
There on the right. Oh my God, 180 degrees.
Taking into account the difference in air temperature, minus 10 degrees Celsius on December 27, 2021, and plus 22 degrees Celsius on July 19, 1918, the effective temperature of the bone was over 212 degrees Celsius. It should be noted that during the process of separating the flesh from the bone in open air, the surface of the bone cooled significantly, and therefore in the fire, the temperature of the bone was much higher than 300 to 400 degrees. The procedure was repeated 3 hours after the burning began. The temperature of the bone turned out to be over 212 to 244 degrees. The procedure was performed once again 4 hours after the burning began. The temperature of the bone turned out to be over 253 to 285 degrees.
The meat was almost completely burned away. The temperature of the bone?
This is here already. 456.
456 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the temperature.
Wow. Yeah, once again. Now it's showing 253.
253.
And the entire bone was already charred to the stage of black incandescence. Thus, we can confidently say that even after burning for a total of 2 hours, when not all of the bone has reached the stage of black incandescence and only the ends of the bones are charred, the bone inside the piece, within those 2 hours, reaches a temperature that is significantly higher than 200 degrees. According to research by modern geneticists, including the renowned scientist Pavel Ivanov, who conducted thorough genetic examinations of the Ekaterinburg remains in the 1990s, it has been clearly established that DNA does not survive when biological objects are heated for 2 hours at temperatures above 200 degrees Celsius. The DNA chain breaks down into extremely small fragments, making DNA analysis of these biological objects based on such fragments completely impossible. Although during these 2 or 3 hours, only the very ends of the bones become charred, the internal structure is still affected at the molecular level. This means, as demonstrated by the 9th experiment, that the entire bone was already exposed to a temperature of at least 200 degrees Celsius and is therefore unsuitable for molecular genetic analysis. If, however, the fire burns for 4 hours or more, then the bones, even those covered with flesh, reach the stage of black incandescence, and not only are the long chains of DNA molecules destroyed, but proteins in general are as well. During the 10th experiment, it was established that in 6.5 hours, 2 whole wild boar carcasses were completely incinerated, leaving behind 8 kilograms of calcined bones. In the 9th experiment, the burning of pieces from 2 carcasses occurred somewhat faster, in 5.5 hours, and even less calcined bone remained, 6 kilograms. In both the 9th and 10th experiments, if the bones had burned for less time, 3 to 4 hours, which is about how much time the Bolsheviks had in the Piglet Ravine on the night of July 19, 1918, not all the bones would have been incinerated. But even then, the edges of all the bones would have been thoroughly charred, blackened, and rendered completely unsuitable for any kind of molecular genetic examinations. Applying the results of these carefully conducted field experiments to assess the second Ekaterinburg remains, which were found in the year 2007, we can confidently say that if we follow the Yurovsky-Pokrovsky version and assume that the Bolsheviks burned 2 bodies in Porosenkov Log, then no genetic examinations would be possible with such bones, as they would be far too damaged for any meaningful analysis. However, if these bones were not exposed to fire, as claimed by the investigation expert Sergei Nikitin and his group, then, even according to the Yurovsky-Pokrovsky version, these bones have no connection to the royal martyrs. We also draw attention to the fact that, judging by the Ekaterinburg remains, there is no evidence that even the edges of these bones were charred. It is impossible to identify the 150 grams of remains of 2 people found in Porosenkov Log in 2007 by any means other than genetic examination. due to their small number and lack of individual characteristics. These bones are fragments from all parts of the skeleton, from the head to the feet. The investigative experts were unable to explain why so few of them were preserved. The small number of bones found in itself also indicates the artificial nature of the burial, as demonstrated by forensic experiments conducted by Yuri Grigoriev and Konstantin Teplov. Their experiments showed that burning two bodies should leave about 10 kilograms of calcined bones, and if the bodies were not burned, then much more would remain. When examining the layout of the second burial at Porosenkov Log, its extremely small size is striking. The depth is 40 centimeters, the width is mostly 50 to 60 centimeters, and the length ranges from 1 to 2 meters. With such a narrow pyre, it would be impossible to cremate two bodies on it, and if the cremation was incomplete, if the bones were not burned to complete calcination, it would be impossible to bury the remains in a pit only 40 centimeters deep and 80 centimeters in diameter. The pit is simply too small. It is also notable that the second Ekaterinburg remains, which themselves showed no signs of exposure to fire, were found together with charcoal, which may indicate that such mixing was artificial. At the same time, unlike the bonfires at Ganina Yama, no melted bullets or lead from bullets were found at this site. Thus, based on studies of the calcination of human teeth at various temperatures and the burning of two whole and two dismembered domestic pig carcasses, it can be concluded that the second Ekaterinburg remains have no connection to the royal martyrs, neither according to the Pokrovsky-Yurovsky version nor any other version. Objection from the investigation's experts. In response to question number 5 in the conclusions of the Church Commission, published on February 2, 2022, it is stated that archaeologists from the Institute of Archaeology of the Russian Academy of Sciences, specialists in ancient cremations, after reviewing the photo archives of the 2007 excavations, found in the processed materials, mistaken for charcoal, a large number of charred bone fragments burned to the stage of white heat, which quickly disintegrate at the slightest touch, and are microscopic in size. At the same time, in response to question number 6, the Church Commission refers to anthropologist Dmitry Rajev, who says the exact opposite. On the fragments we discovered, there were traces of natural destruction of bone tissue, which is usually associated with the activity of soil biota, bacteria, plants, insects, and others. Under certain conditions, bones can completely decay and simply disappear. When specialists from the Church Commission give two mutually exclusive answers to the same question, it inevitably leads to the assumption that both answers are incorrect. If most of the bodies were burned and most of the bones reached the stage of calcination, that is, they were in the fire for at least 6 hours at temperatures above 800 degrees Celsius, then how could 150 grams of bone fragments, from skull to feet, remain untouched by the fire? If on the other hand two skeletons simply decayed, then firstly, this could have happened to any skeletons, not necessarily those that had been in a fire. Secondly, it is unclear why, in this burial, two skeletons almost completely decayed over 89 years, while 9 skeletons located just 70 meters away remained almost intact over roughly the same period of 73 years. At the same time, archaeologists know that charred parts of bones do not decay. The experts of the Church Commission did not provide answers to these questions. At the conference on November 28, 2021, in the Grand Hall of the Congress at the Cosmos Hotel in Moscow, forensic expert Sergei Nikitin stated that the reason there are no traces of fire damage on the second Ekaterinburg remains, discovered in 2007, could be that the bones were treated with sulfuric acid after burning. According to Sergei Nikitin, sulfuric acid could have destroyed the charred parts of the bones and left only those parts that were not burned. In order to confirm or refute this thesis by expert Sergei Nikitin, charred bones obtained as a result of a field experiment on December 27, 2021, were placed in sulfuric acid in specialized laboratories. As a result, it was found that after being placed in the acid, there was a slight release of bubbles and the sulfuric acid darkened. However, in essence, there was no significant destruction of the charred areas of the bone, nor of the bone itself after about an hour of exposure to the acid. Thus, this field experiment confirmed that if the remains found in 2007 at Porosenkov Log had been in a bonfire for even a couple of hours, their edges should have been burned to a blackened state. And sulfuric acid, which is a highly corrosive and powerful chemical substance, could not have destroyed this blackened layer that was present. It should, by all scientific reasoning, have remained on those bones, undisturbed. These comprehensive and thorough tests, conducted by experts, once again confirmed that the remains found in the year 2007 at Porosenkov Log have absolutely no connection whatsoever to the Pokrovsky-Yurovsky version of events and accordingly cannot in any way be related to Tsarevich Alexei and Grand Duchess Maria. Thus, independent experts, dentists, and forensic medical specialists have scientifically proven through forensic experiments that the so-called Ekaterinburg remains found in 2007 at Porosenkov Log are not royal remains. Science has confirmed what the Orthodox Church and the people of God have known for decades. Since 1991, on the anniversaries of the royal family's martyrdom and that of their loyal servants, processions have been held to Ganina Yama, which Patriarch Alexei II called a living antimins, where the holy relics of the royal martyrs, burned and scattered by the Bolsheviks, are located. These processions do not turn into the empty Porosenkov Log, nor are prayer services held there. On July 17, 2018, Patriarch Kirill personally led a procession of 100,000 people. After a solemn 3-hour night service, the primate of the Russian Church, surrounded by metropolitans and priests, walked more than 20 kilometers from the church on the blood to Ganina Yama with prayer, without paying the slightest attention to the false grave created by the Bolsheviks in Porosenkov Log. It is at Ganina Yama that God's grace abounds. Here miracles and healings take place. The people of God have borne witness to this for 4 decades now. This has never happened and does not happen in Porosenkov Log.
With a joyful and grateful heart, I walk this long and sorrowful path together with all of you, my dear friends and companions. On this significant and memorable day, we come together to celebrate and remember a tragic event in our history. However, we celebrate because it is through this very event that the royal family was canonized as saints. And we truly believe that today, indeed, the family of the royal passion bearers is with us in this prayer and in this procession. And as we offer our heartfelt and sincere prayers to the holy and blessed servants of God, we humbly and earnestly ask them, first and foremost, to intercede before Almighty God for our beloved Russian land, for all our people, and for our holy church, so that the Lord, in his infinite mercy, may graciously protect and safeguard our fatherland, our people, and our church from all turmoil, from every form of division, from schisms, and from all manifestations of human injustice and wrongdoing, so that we may steadfastly preserve the truth of the faith and the deep piety of our people. We firmly believe that if we are able to preserve this precious faith and piety, we will in turn preserve Russia itself, and the country will become truly great, and the people will flourish and prosper. Through their holy prayers, may the Lord in his boundless compassion protect and watch over the Russian land. Amen.
As St. John of Shanghai, St. John of Kronstadt, the revered Optina elders, as well as the pious and devout ascetics of our time, including the wise elders Nikolai Guryanov, Kirill Pavlov, and many others, all teach us through their words and examples that the fate of the Tsar is closely connected with the fate of Russia itself. Any mistakes or errors in the Tsar's affairs, especially in the important matter of finding and identifying the holy relics of the royal passion bearers, can ultimately cost the Church, Russia, and the Russian people very dearly indeed.